Vedrat ji, Pushpesh Pant ji, Dr. Pradeep, Pallavi, distinguished members of the faculty, not only of law but of other faculties, and above all, students, seekers. Well, I've been advertised today as having to speak on the art of advocacy because you have already a Moot going on. And the premise of that topic is, of course, that many, if not most of you, would be interested in pursuing the vocation of law after you leave this place. It is, of course, gratifying to note that premise, the premise of wanting to pursue law. Because if you look at global and Indian surveys, the three most despised category of professions, two in particular, are lawyers and journalists. So it's gratifying to know that when you have jibes, like a lawyer first learns how to get on, then get honor, and then get honest in that order. Or the jibe that lawyers are the only community which draft 10,000 word documents and calls it a brief. It is therefore good to know that despite overcoming all those psychological problems, you still want to do law after you leave here. On a more serious note though, since I joined the profession, there have been three remarkable developments in it, which is why perhaps you have all these universities coming up like this. You have so much of interest in law. And these three were actually significant and conspicuous by their absence when we started our legal careers. Number one was that law was clearly and categorically a refuge of last resort. After you've tried all the services and failed many of them, after you've tried all the other alternatives, and your parents were completely ostracizing you, you would say, okay, as a refuge of last resort, I will do law. For many years now, and this is a real serious topic of research as to how this happened, for many years now, over a decade, law has become an option of first choice from a refuge of last resort. That's a remarkable development, almost unnoticed. The second has been that larger and larger number of persons totally unconnected with law are wanting to join law. I've had interns and juniors whose parents are top doctors, the top of the top. Their only child wants to do law. I've had persons whose family background is completely architecture. Their children want to do law despite a lot of dissuasion by the family. Indeed, I have notable examples of persons with thriving industry who are lamenting that our children want to do actually and actively the vocation of law and not take care of the industry, which is a family business. That's another excellent development. And these are all unconnected with the legal profession. And third, last but not the least, is the explosion of ladies in the profession. And not the quantitative explosion, but qualitatively doing well at every level, from the bottom to just below the top. I will of course concede that at the very top there are few, because it takes time to graduate up there. But barring that very top layer, women are doing extraordinarily well in this profession at each and every level. Each of these 3 points were conspicuous by their absence. Now, before I speak about the art of advocacy, let me tell you that there is no one-size-fits-all approach, because law has several categories. You have categorization from the point of view of the nature of the practice you do. So you can be a corporate lawyer, you can be a group of friends in a firm, you can be an individual, a much smaller human being as part of a very large firm, you can be a direct practitioner, and you can be a senior counsel eventually, or you can be an in-house lawyer. These are all very different paradigms of practice. And therefore, when you talk of advocacy, it obviously applies to a much narrower segment of these paradigms. Many of them do not involve advocacy in the sense in which we understand it, although they do involve advocacy of a different kind. The other categorization to be kept in mind before I take you through the topic is the exponential growth, indeed explosion, of kinds of law. In my time, we never heard of sports law. We never heard of entertainment law. We never even heard really, it was there. But the actual study and the number of cases was infinitesimal. Patent law. So, keeping these distinctions in mind, let me start by pointing out something which is obvious but missed frequently. The difference between a good advocate and a good lawyer. In many cases there is not much difference. But a top-notch advocate need not be a very good lawyer. And a top-notch lawyer is frequently not a top advocate. Advocacy is an art by itself, in addition to and separate from lawyering. The best example I can think of historically, and both were giants, and I mean no disrespect to either of them, is to point out the contrast between Chandu Daftari and Setalvad, Motilal Setalvad. Motilal Setalvad was an excellent lawyer. He would research the topic and start from the lack of power of attorney, through limitation, through every jurisdictional ground, and then argue the merits, punctiliously, precisely, categorically, logically. That's a great lawyer. And he was, as you know, Attorney General, a top-notch lawyer. Chandu Daftari believed in minimum work and maximum output. He was a top-notch advocate, perhaps not as great a lawyer as Setalvad, but he had the turn of the phrase, the silver-tongued Chandu Daftari. Let me tell you two very quick anecdotes about him. This is the art of advocacy. He was arguing in the late 60s a matter before, I believe, if I recollect, Justice Adatullah's bench, under the then emerging Gambling Act. It was a Gambling Act. Those days, of course, the number of cases in the Supreme Court used to be much fewer. So in the middle of the argument, Hidayatullah asked him, he said, Mr. Daftari, how do you define this gambling? What is this gambling? There were, of course, sections, there were various things in the Act. So Chandu Daftari paused, looked quizzically and mischievously at the judges and said, my lords, it's a very difficult thing to define, but if your lordships is forcing me to define it, the best I can do is to remind you that what we lawyers do here every day when we move petitions before our lordships is the closest which comes to gambling. There is another more interesting story about him, and this is actually of interest because Nani Palkiwala, probably the greatest, not probably, the greatest advocate we've had, and a scintillating intersection of advocacy and lawyering. Perhaps made India immune from dictatorship. He made sure that by establishing Keshwananda Bharati, the basic structure doctrine, we became, of course, the first country in the world to propound the doctrine that even a constitutional amendment can be unconstitutional. What a remarkable doctrine. Many other countries have copied it. When Nani opened Keshwananda Bharati before 13 judges of the Supreme Court in 1973, the first day, it had a lot of political overtones as well. The first day he had a barrage of questions from 30 different judges, the largest ever bench, which sat for the longest possible time in the Supreme Court. And before he could answer Judge 1, there would be a question from Judge 5. And before he could answer, there would be a question from Judge 8. So he was exhausted on the first day. In the evening, he told his juniors, he said, I will not argue tomorrow. I cannot argue tomorrow. So how close we came to not having Keshwananda. Chandu Daftari, who was one of the people assisting him, said, Nani, you'll have a quiet tomorrow. Don't worry. Please argue. That evening, Chandu Daftari, with his pipe, used to smoke a pipe, trotted off to Chief Justice Sikri's chamber. Chandu Daftari was also Attorney General of India earlier, and judges received him with great respect, said, to what do we owe this honor, Mr. Daftari, that you have come to the chamber? So Chandu Daftari told the Chief Justice, C3, he said, oh, what an extraordinary day you had today. The whole country is looking up to this court for the fantastic quality of hearing going on. And I was very impressed when a young girl came with her father especially to watch the hearing. And there was no, she had no connection with the law, but she said, I want to hear the hearing. And she came out after the whole day, she said, it was a great venture for me, it was a great occasion for me. But tell me, uncle, I found it very strange that there was these fantastic people sitting in the dais saying such fantastic things, and there was this rude man down there interrupting them. And next, Sikri said, point taken, Mr. Daftari, I'll speak to my brother judges. And next day, Balkiwala was able to develop what became known as the basic structure theory. This is one example of quick-witted advocacy. It is an example of how there is a possibility of conveying the same message in so many different ways. Ultimately, advocacy is about the ability to communicate by speech, putting across in a succinct, pithy, relevant, precise manner your idea in a generally pleasing manner. So the moment you agree that it is the ability to communicate by speech, then it has something to do with two concepts, time and language. Brevity and English language, to be precise. Of course, it was Montesquieu, the French philosopher, but to speak methodically, prudently and fully is a talent which few can have, unquote. And advocacy is a lot about that. Moot coding is a lot about that. Two concepts of advocacy, therefore, of ability to communicate are time and language. Well, let me start with time. You heard this thing about brevity is the soul of wit. Brevity is, of course, very important. It's vital. I don't know how many of you know about Dr. Johnson's letter to Boswell. The letter starts by saying, Dear Boswell, I am extremely sorry to have to write to you a long letter because I don't have the time to write a short one. Because a precise short letter requires much more preparation, precision, ability, focus than a long rambling one. And that is another aspect of advocacy which all of you would be well advised to cultivate. There is, of course, a frequent paradigm of lawyers arguing endlessly. And when a judge asks, how much time will you take? They say about half an hour more, they go on for 2 hours. And then one advocate had the temerity to say, just allow me a few minutes more, I'm ending. I won't take much more time, he said. The judge could not resist himself and he intervened to say, Mr. Counsel, you're talking about time, please don't bother, please don't worry. You are now encroaching upon eternity, not time. And therefore, please keep in mind as an aspect of advocacy, the concept of brevity. There is in that sense not much difference between good drafting and good advocacy, although we're not talking of drafting here. A person who is a good draftsman in law will normally be also a good advocate. Because at the writing level, and I'm sure your moot courts require some degree of drafting, you have qualities which do convert to similar qualities in advocacy. In drafting, the 5 C's are the most important. 5 C's: conciseness, completeness, clarity, correctness, and courtesy. Not only in speech, but in drafting. Hyperbole and adjectives are normally counterproductive. They are good to impress your client, but they rarely help where behind them hides a hollow argument. Incidentally, you must know that Indians love to use the word fraud very liberally. We use fraud in our normal conversation every day. In every case, every lawyer is saying this is a fraud on my client. The word fraud, of course, means very different things in different cultures. In England, if an advocate was to draft the word fraud, and it is found by the court to be a frivolous or a somewhat casual plea, then not only is the client fined a lot, but the advocate can be personally fined. Because fraud is a serious matter. It impinges on your reputation. Jargon again must be avoided. If you have to use jargon to impress anyone, it must be immediately followed by an explanation. I don't know if you know that England, of course, is a remarkable country. It has all the old origins, but they have changed from within, while the countries which follow and imitate England haven't changed, like India. You have these nice words called plaint, written statement, rejoinder, replication. These are words borrowed from English law, which all common law countries use, Commonwealth countries indeed use. In England itself, they issued a new dictionary for lawyers in the High Court of Justice on the Strand in London. That dictionary gives convert. It says, don't call it a plaint, call it a claim. Don't call it a written statement, call it reply. Don't call it a rejoinder, call it a reply of reply. You must demystify. So you must use jargon. Of course, it's useful to increase your fees, but use jargon followed immediately by simple explanations. Another aspect of ability to communicate is language. And since the last longest and largest bastion of the English language is the judiciary and law, you cannot get away from it by saying that there is a lot of Hindicization of the rest of the country, which is extremely good. But law remains the great bastion in advocacy. So you have to be good in your vehicle of communication. The European Council humorously compiled a list of examples of the worst abuses of the English language. And we find them frequently in courts every day. I had once suggested to some judges, I said, if you exempt some of us from the law of contempt, we can have a reporter sitting in each of the 15 courts, noting out snippets every day, and then publishing them at the end of the week, humor in court. Humor in court is based on language. But this European Council compilation of abuses of the English language, which is the main vehicle of advocacy. I'll give you two examples. A Budapest Zoo, this of course was issued for Europeans, many of whom do not know as good English as they should. So the Budapest Zoo had a sign which said, do not feed animals. If you have suitable food, give it to the guard on duty. A tailor on a Greek island, struggling, Greeks are the worst in English, struggling with English said, because the Greek island of Rhodes is a hot tourist spot, and he could not finish his job to stitch suits. So he put up a notice board where he put in English. He says, in such a rush, we will execute customers in strict rotation. So you can see how the vehicle of communication, both of you and I mean the same, and how different a thought we each convey. Quickness of thought, quickness of repartee on your feet is the heart of advocacy. And those of you who become lawyers soon must remember that frequently, one of the most underestimated tricks of the trade, frequently the difference between winning and losing a case is how well you perform in the rejoinder. In our country we have an opening by the petitioner and you have a reply by the respondent. But then you have a rejoinder by the petitioner. So he gets a second bite at the apple. A effective rejoinder which is pointed has won many losing cases, and a casual rejoinder has lost many a winning case. You have to be able to, on your feet, because rejoinders follow frequently straight after a counter. And therefore you have to have the ability to absorb, to harmonize, and to respond on your feet. You also have to realize that advocacy is a lot about realizing as in real life. But there is no black or white. As in real life, so also in society, so also in law, so also. From that realization, large areas of life are grey. And the reason why advocacy works, indeed I would say the reason for the very existence of counsel, of advocates, is to bring out those nuances of grey in the best possible light which favors your client or your side. Speed reading, the ability to assimilate a lot of facts in a short while, is a self-preservatory quality which you should develop. But facts don't mean, in an accident case, why the lady left the house, what was the reason she went shopping. The facts mean only relevant facts. Focus on relevant facts when the accident occurred. I'll end soon. And of course, in all this, it's an additional blessing if you have a good memory. But that's largely, I think, a non-acquired trait. But that helps a lot of the good memory. Let me end by two of the most important qualities of advocacy or being a good advocate. They are in fact the qualities which cut across not only advocacy, but all form of lawyering. And although they are not strictly limited to advocacy, I'd be failing in my duty if I did not deal with them. The first of those two is hard work. Remember, lawyering generally and advocacy in particular is 99% perspiration. It's less than 1% inspiration. There are lots of substitutes for hard work. There is no substitute for hard work. And the second is, and as far as hard work is concerned, the famous philosopher jurist in USA, Joseph Story, put it well in a quotation which is frequently only half quoted. He said, I'll quote the whole of it. I will not say that law will admit no rival, but I will say that law is a very jealous mistress and requires long and constant courtship. It is not to be won by flinging favors as you might win mistresses, but by lavish homage. Unquote. So you have to do lavish homage to this jealous mistress known as law, without which you cannot succeed in this profession. The other, of course, perhaps the only other quality which stands in a higher footing than hard work is a reputation which you must develop, a reputation for probity, a sense of fairness and balance. That's not something which you can take a pill of, a vitamin tablet, and say you've developed probity. This happens incrementally, slowly, inch by inch, millimeter by millimeter, over your 10-year career. But it's very interesting that you must start doing it the first day, because it accumulates in your bank account unknowingly. You'll be surprised how many judges go along with the lawyer whom they trust without cross-checking and counter-checking each page, each fact, because they know over time that he will not mislead them. On the other hand, you will lose a very good case if the judge, nothing personal about it, knows that you tend to take liberties with the truth. You tend to exaggerate. Your citations or the meaning of the citations or your page references are not correct. So this is the meaning of reputation. Of course, when people talk of legal ethics, they say this is an oxymoron. It's like bittersweet, hot cold. The two don't go together. But yes, they do go together, and you have to learn to make them together. Let me end, friends, by telling you about the last aspect of the origin of the legal profession. The very famous philosopher in USA, a jurisprudence professor at Harvard, called Dean Roscoe Pound. He was the dean of the law faculty of Harvard. And he wrote many books. But one of them he wrote was about idealism in the legal profession. And then in that he wrote that people forget, and especially young students today must be reminded, about the difference between a profession generally and business. At one level there is none today. In most cases there is none. And most professions also are reconfigured in a way that there is no difference, for example, between a large law firm and a business. But in particular in advocacy, in counsel work, in direct practice as an advocate, and even in large firms which resemble businesses, you must remember between a profession and business. Roscoe Pound jurisprudentially put it by saying there are three distinctions between a business and a profession. And that must be maintained for you to become good advocates, to become good lawyers. Distinction number one is that there are three ideas which are unique to a profession, which are not necessarily found, in fact not necessary to a business. They may exist, but they are not a necessary condition precedent to a business. The first is the idea of learning. So while you can start business because you have the risk-taking ability, entrepreneurship, only you and I have to have a law degree to start lawyering. A doctor must spend 7 odd years of hard work acquiring a degree to start a profession of medicine. An architect must do the same. This is not required in entrepreneurship, in business, in vocations, generally. So first is the idea of learning. Never forget that you are from a learned profession. It's not a mere word. So you have to work hard to acquire that learning, which puts you in a class apart. Society looks upon you as a learned class. Second is the idea of organization. It is now of course forgotten, but almost all professions that I know started as guilds. How did lawyers start? You have this word in English, Inns of Court. Inns of Court were in a form of Gurugram in England. They were guilds around a master, 10, 12, 15 pupils worked. And they slowly developed. Lawyers, guilds. Medical guilds also developed like that. Lots of other professions had guilds. Guilds had an idea of fellowship. They had an idea of commonality, of uniformity, imbued by a similar ethic. A business or a enterprise or a commercial vocation needs to have no guild or club. Chartered accountants have a club, lawyers have a club, architects have a club, etc. Club is of course a modified word, but real idea is an organized system of a guild, which is supposed to impart common values, common culture, a common heritage. And the last is the most important of these three ideas. He said ultimately, even if you have the two in a business, you must have a supra-added element as a compulsory element in a profession, which is public service. They used to say in the old days about all professions, a doctor or a lawyer, or for that matter other professions, do not do doctoring or lawyering to earn, but they get paid so that they may do lawyering and doctoring. So society pays them because society needs doctors and lawyers for strife resolution and medical resolution. Now I know it sounds quaint, it sounds unreal. Money has become the most important part, but still, right at the back of the profession, there is an element of public service. You know, we seniors still have a gown that is now stitched up. In the old days it came from England. You have a whole pouch in the back of the gown. That flap in the back of the gown is a pouch. The origin of the pouch is that the senior council, the QC, does the public service. And then society puts in that pouch what it thinks is appropriate for discharging that public duty. So it is not that the be-all, the end-all, the object, the end, the entire raison d'etre is to make a profit, as might justifiably be true for a business. Well friends, I have taken more than my advertised time. I have violated my brevity rule, but some of us are in a bit of an excellent class. But I would congratulate you all in having such an excellent institution. A lot of us feel envious that when we started our career, we didn't have such great institutions and we had to go abroad to look for even greater institutions. But I think legal education now has come a long, long way. The infrastructure you have, the options you have, the opportunities you have are something which you have to be thankful for. Of course, there is still a lot of rigidity and inflexibility which can be improved substantially, but you must make the best of what you have, especially in the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
We express our sincere gratitude for your words of wisdom. We are sure listening to you inspires